Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Benjamin, and this is going to be another GameMaker tutorial. And today we are going to start designing an RTS, or real-time strategy game, similar to StarCraft or Age of Empires. Of course, in this tutorial series, it will be a series. It won't be quite as complicated as StarCraft or Age of Empires. I'm going to keep it simpler, but I am going to advise you that this is an advanced tutorial. This isn't going to be a super easy tutorial. If this is the first time you're using GameMaker, I would recommend checking out my platform tutorial because that's a great one to start with. This is probably one you want to do when you're a little bit more comfortable with GameMaker. That doesn't mean that you can't do it. If you decide you want to try it anyways, go ahead because I will step you through every single line of code and every step of the way. But I'm going to do it fast. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is create a sprite. And we're going to call this sprite, let's call this sprite worker. And I'm going to load a sprite because I've already drawn these images, but basically all they are 24 by 16 images of a ship facing the right. Make sure that the image is facing to the right. That's crucial. So I've got this little image. I'm going to center it, and I'm going to create another image, and we're going to call this sprite fighter. And I'm going to load in this image because I've got a slightly different one. Awesome. Center it. Perfect. Now I'm going to create another sprite. We're going to call this sprite mask, and this is just going to be our collision mask. I'm going to edit it and make this 16 by 16 pixels and open up this sprite and come into it. And it's just going to be a plain black circle. Nothing too special. Usually with this size of circle, I like to add one more pixel on each edge here, because to me it makes it look more circle-ish when before it wasn't as circle-ish. So then we're going to center that image as well. We're going to create one more. This is our last sprite for this part of the tutorial, part 1. We're going to call it sprite target. And we're going to load in this sprite. So in this tutorial, we're going to do basics for the ship movement. It's going to be in outer space. Obviously, I've got these ships. And that's basically what we're going to do. So the first thing we want to do is create a couple objects. We're going to create one called object ship. Okay? This is a generic object. I'm actually not going to give it any sprite for right now because this is going to be a parent object, and I'll explain that a little bit more in just a second. We're going to create a second object, call this object worker. Okay, and we're going to give it the sprite of the worker, and we're going to give it the parent of the ship. So its parent object is going to be the ship, and it's going to have a mask of the sprite mask that we created. And that's all we want to do with it for now. So we're going to create another object, call this object fighter. I'm so excited for this tutorial, actually, because I really love RTS games. I play StarCraft 2 all of the time. Well, I'd say more like once a week, but still, that's pretty often. So we're going to give it the sprite fighter. We're going to give it a parent of object ship, and we're going to give it a mask of sprite, not target, mask. There we go. Now we're going to create another object. This is our last object, I think. Call this object target. And we're going to give it that target sprite. And that's all we're going to do with that. Awesome. So save your game, and we're going to create a script. So click on create a script here up at the top, and my script thing disappeared. Hopefully I can get that back. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to call this script, or SCR, ship init. So this will be an initialization script for our ships. We're just going to set some variables. I'm going to do a triple dash or a triple backslash whatever that is comment here, just so that when we're calling this script, it knows what it's going to look like. and that'll come more in handy later. But for now, we're going to initialize some variables. The first one we're going to create is called target, and we're just going to set it equal to -1. Then we're going to create one called selected, and we're going to set it to true. That's a boolean, so it'll only be true or false. Now the target is actually going to be an object, and we're just setting it to -1, saying that there's no object basically right now. So selected, this one will come in handy later on when we can actually select the ships. But for this tutorial, we're just going to go over the movement for them, so they're always going to be selected. That just makes it easier for me to do in this first tutorial. The second one is when we'll actually go over selecting the ships. And we're going to set a state because I love states, and state is going to be equal to idle. Okay, so all of our ships are going to start in an idle state. Then we're going to create another variable called speed and set it equal to 4, and acceleration and set it equal to 0.5. Okay, and that's all we're going to have inside of this script. Now we're going to create another script, and we're going to call this script ship idle. So this will be what our ship does when it's in the idle state. We'll do / here, script ship idle, and then we're going to all we really need to do is set some friction. So friction equals 0.5. And the reason we want to set some friction is because when our ship's idling, we want it to slow down and stop. So that's simple enough for our idle function, or script I should say. And we're going to create another script, and we're going to call this script ship move. Now this one's going to be a little bit more complicated. Quite a few more lines of code, but I'll explain it for you. So set the friction to 0. I know that's kind of redundant putting a comment like that, but for newer people it's useful to have comments like that, and that's why I usually do them in my tutorial videos. So friction equals 0. And why are we setting friction to 0? Well, our acceleration is actually 0.5, so if our acceleration is 0.5 and our friction is 0.5, they're going to cancel each other out and the ship won't move. So I just like to alternate setting friction to 0, setting it back on when we're not moving, when we're in an idle state. Okay, now we want to move towards the target if it exists. Exists. I hate trying to spell. Okay, so we're going to do if instance exists object, let's see, target, because we're going to set our target to that variable that we create in our initialize script. So when we create the target, we're going to set it to that variable, and so we can keep track of this specific ship will have its own target. Each ship in the game will have its very own target, and so that way different ships can go to different targets, different places, and it can keep track of whether or not the ship has reached its own target. So you can do this with a variable, with just some variables, but I like to do it with an object because I'm keeping it simple, and that's just the way I'm going to do it. So target is going to equal, or if the target exists, motion add, so we're going to move something, we're going to move this ship, and we want it to move. First we're going to give it a direction, so point direction. You can see down here we need to give it 2 x values and 2 y values. So the first x value is going to be our x value, and the second value is going to be our y value. Then we're going to do target.x, target.y. So that's going to get the direction pointing from us to the target. Whatever that direction is, we're going to grab it and pass that into our movement, our motion add. Then our speed is actually going to be our acceleration, so just type ACC because we've created that variable. So we should start moving towards this target. Now, if we reach the target, we want to delete it. So delete the target when we reach it. Awesome. So if position meeting and XY target, so our X position, our Y position, if that is meeting the target, then we want to with target instance destroy. So all that does is it goes into the target object and executes an instance destroy function inside the target object, so the target will destroy and not this. And then we want to set our state to idle. State equals idle, because our ship is going to be in a move state, but once we reach the target, we want to set it back to an idle state. Simple enough. Not too complicated there. Now, why do I have, let's see, instance exists, object target, motion, add, point direction. Oh, let's see. I've got some sort of an error here. It says wrong number of arguments for function or script. Motion, add. How many arguments does motion add have? Motion add. It's got direction and speed, so we pass it direction. X, Y. Oh, I did a comma here instead of a dot. That's why. I apologize. Typo. So that should have been a dot instead of a comma. It's target dot X comma space target dot Y parenthesis, and that parenthesis, and then another comma. Awesome. Now we're going to, outside of this code down here, we're going to write one more thing. We want to make sure that our ship doesn't go faster. So don't go faster than the max speed. And that's just a simple code. If speed is greater than speed, which is our maximum speed, right? Speed equals speed. That sounds really funny. But, oh well, that's the way I wrote it. Pretty simple code. Just check to make sure that we're not going, if we are going faster than 4, which is what we set this variable to, then set our speed to 4. That way we don't go too fast. So we've created these 3 scripts, but we're actually not using them in our objects yet. So, what we're going to want to do now is go into our object, and we're going to actually go into the ship object, which is our parent. And this is the benefit of using parents, because we can put this code in one spot and both of our child objects will use the code. And then if they have slight differences, we can add those differences to these objects. But anything that's going to be generalized, like movement, all of the ships are going to move, they will want to have, that will want to be in our parent code. So let's come into our parent object, which is object ship. We're going to add a create event, and we will just call this initialize the ship, and we're just going to call script ship init and initialize it. Okay, easy enough. Now we're going to add an event. This is going to be a step event, and this is going to control our state. So this is beautiful because control the states. So what this does is it just checks to see what state we're in and then runs a specific code depending on which state we're in. And I love this idea because it's like having one object that is actually more than one object, but it's always the same object. You just switch states. But it will run different step event codes based on what state you're in, or even collision codes, but for this example, only step. So if state equals, and this is the comparison operator, well, one equal sign is an assignment operator. This is a comparison to compare these two values. If state equals move, script ship move. So we're going to execute the move script. Else if state equals idle. You could do this in a switch statement, but I like to do it like this. It's simpler. script ship idle. Execute the idle script. Easy enough. Then after that, we're going to have one more code that's image angle. So this controls the angle that our image is facing equals direction. So our ship is going to face whatever direction it's moving. That's a really simple line of code. Face the direction you're moving. It's a really simple line of code for a pretty cool effect in the game. It's really cool. I'll show you. So, awesome. We've got a step event, we've got a create event, but we need to tell our ship when it needs to move. We need to create our target object, and we're going to do that with a mouse event, a global mouse, and a global right pressed. Okay? Create the target and change to a move state. Awesome. Oops, I forgot to triple comment that. So, let's create our target, and we want to make sure there isn't already a target in the room. Make sure there isn't already a target in the room. So if target equals, let's see, does not, so that's a exclamation point, does not equal -1. So we're going to make sure that the variable is not equal to -1. And instance exists target. So this is saying if target doesn't equal -1, which is what it starts out as. So we're making sure that it doesn't equal -1. And there is a target in the room. So that's what this is. Instance exists target. So there is a target in the room with target instance destroy. So if there is a target in the room, we're going to delete that target. So we're making sure that there's no targets in the room. Okay? Every time we right click, we're going to delete the previous target and create a new one for every ship that's selected. That's what that code does. Target. So now we're actually going to assign a value to the variable. Equals instance create mouse x, that's the mouse position on the screen, mouse y, object target. So we're going to create an object target at the mouse position on the screen when they right click and assign it to this variable. Why are we assigning it to this variable? So we can keep track of it for later and control it. That's why we're doing that. State equals move. So we're going to set the ship's state. Now we need to have one more event, and this is a collision event, and it's just with the ship. And the benefit, once again, of having a parent object is if a fighter object collides with a worker object, it's the same as a ship colliding with a ship, because that's what the parent object will do. And so the code, these two objects will know to bounce off of each other, to move away from each other. So we're going to add in a collision event. We're going to call this, I don't know, something really generic, collide code. That's really generic. And we're going to do another motion add. Motion add. Now we want to pass it a direction. Which direction? Well, we want to move away from the other ship. So point, direction, other, that's referring to the other ship in the collision, dot x, other dot y, x, y. So if we start at the other ship and then point towards our x and y position, that's going to be pointing away from it. Okay? And then we're going to pass it a value of 1, which is how far we want to move. Now, one more thing I want to do is just to make sure that our x and y values aren't equal to each other, because if you collide with a ship and your x and y values are equal to each other and you don't do something about it, that can be bad. So this is kind of a complicated code, but I'll explain it. Check to see if you would be stuck, because if they're equal, you technically would get stuck. And ow, my wrist kind of hurts. Been typing a lot today. If, getting carpal tunnel, hope not. If x equals other dot x, right? That's all we need to check. Well, we don't even need to check that. We need to check if x equals other dot x and y equals other dot y. So we need to check both. So if we're basically exactly where the other ship is, if ID, so that's this ship's ID, is greater than other dot ID, this is how we distinguish between the two. X plus equals 1, else x minus equals 1. Now, what does that do? It's pretty simple code. What it does is if our ships are equal to each other, like in position, the only way to distinguish between them is the IDs, because each object in the game has its own unique ID. So we're going to check, and whichever one has a greater ID, we're going to move it to the right, and the one with the lower ID, we're going to move it to the left. And that should prevent the ships from getting stuck inside of each other. Now, save your game, because I don't want you to lose your progress. Create a room, and we're going to call this room test, because this won't actually be a real room in the game. And we're going to give it a background color of black, because we're in outer space and it's super dark. And we're going to give it a view. So click on the Views tab, go to Enable the Use of Views, and let me maximize this. And visible when room starts. The view in the room is going to be, actually go back to the Settings tab, set this to 320 by 180, because that's going to be how big the room is. Kind of small, I know. Now go back to the views. The view in the room is going to be 320 by 180. Okay? That's how big the view is in the room, and you can see that little white box. But the port on the screen, we're going to draw a little bigger. It's going to be 640 by 360. And that will scale everything up in the room, make it look a little bigger. Kind of pixelate it. Now we're going to put a worker and one fighter in this room. Okay. And now we're going to save one more time. Before we run it though, it'll look kind of blurry if we don't do this. So go to this tab right here, or this icon. Change, that went away. It's change global game settings. So click on that. And we're going to go into the Windows tab, the Graphics tab over here on the left, and uncheck interpolate colors between pixels. That will keep it from being blurry. Press OK. Save the game, and let's run it and pray that there are no errors in this code. But probably there are, because I almost always have errors, and then I end up having to re-record the video because I want it to be perfect for you guys. So, okay, that worked surprisingly well. I mean, I don't see any errors with this right now. The ships, you execute a command, both the ships will move to the target and then stop when they get there. So, awesome. If there are any errors in this, I'm sure we'll discover them in the later tutorial series and fix them. But this is basic RTS movement for you guys, and we will cover selection, and this game is going to be awesome. We're going to build all these spaceships that'll battle each other. There'll be artificial intelligence and space stations that can create more ships and mine resources, and it sounds complicated, but we're actually going to keep it pretty simple, and I'm super excited for it. So stay tuned, be sure and watch the rest of these tutorials if I've already finished them. If I haven't finished them, well, share it with your friends. Like, favorite this video, and give me a comment, and I really appreciate you guys, and I will talk to you guys later.